Project Education South Sudan is a Denver nonprofit that was founded in 2005 to support education in South Sudan. Prior to becoming the world's newest country, South Sudan had a long history of occupation by colonial powers and followed that with decades of civil war in its effort to secede from northern part of Sudan. As a result of this history, as South Sudan became close to achieving its independence, it had very, very little in the way of educational infrastructure. The founders of Project Education South Sudan were moved to help the South Sudanese people. Since 2015, South Sudan has focused its educational work on educating girls in secondary school. Shockingly, only 1% to 2% of girls in South Sudan graduate from high school. We provide tuition for impoverished but ambitious girls to attend some of the few functioning high schools in the Bor area, which is in rural South Sudan. We provide tuition, but we also provide after-school programs such as mentoring, peer group bonding, vocational training, and computer training. This extra support allows these girls to resist early marriage and to avoid becoming mothers while they're still teenagers. It gives them tools to find employment and to give back to their community. With this tuition and after-school support, the girls in our program are graduating at a rate of over 90%, contrasting to the norm of 1% to 2% in the rest of the country. We're currently supporting 80 girls in high school. Since 2015, 140 girls have graduated through our program from secondary school. Project Education South Sudan is grateful to the Rotary Club of Golden, Colorado, for sharing with us a belief in the importance of educating young girls in South Sudan. We both see it as a key pathway to reaching sustainable peace and prosperity in South Sudan. The shared goal aligns with the mission of Golden Rotary's International Service Committee, which is to support efforts toward peace and education through understanding and service. The Golden Rotary Club first became involved in Project Education South Sudan's program when it led a Rotary District grant, which resulted in 23 girls attending high school and our leadership programs for 1 year. Today, the club is continuing its generous support by hosting screening parties right now to watch this cooking demonstration. I would also like to introduce Miklina Kenji, who is the Executive Director of Empowerment Through Education, another organization that shares our vision of the importance of girls' education in South Sudan. Miklina?
Thank you. Yeah, we are running educational program in South Sudan to help educate the girls and to have them have a voice through education. Because we strongly believe that once they are educated, no one will be able to take away the education they get. So we are currently sponsoring 70 girls. We have 20 in South Sudan and we have 50 in Uganda. We have seen how far they have come since we started the scholarship program for the girls. They have changed a lot. Now they can talk without fear. They interact, they see each other like sisters, they help the younger ones. They do everything to help support each other. Because we believe if we need to empower a nation, we need to empower girls so that they can bring the change we want. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Today's cooking demonstration is meant to give us a taste of the culture in South Sudan as we continue to support girls' education there. Our chef today is Dr. Noella. She was born in South Sudan, which was then part of South Sudan, and at the time was fighting for its independence from the Greater Sudan. Dr. Noella attended elementary school in Juba, which is the largest city in southern Sudan. Her family relocated to Khartoum in 1989 to escape the ongoing civil war. She attended college in the United States, where she double majored in chemistry and biology, which is a good foundation for a cook. She began her medical career at Georgetown University School of Medicine, followed by a residency in anesthesiology at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio. She currently practices anesthesiology in San Antonio. Dr. Noella, knowing of the absence of written descriptions of South Sudanese cultural practices, she started a online service called Taste of South Sudan several years ago. There she preserves and shares South Sudan's food, recipes, cultures, and traditions. Some of the recipes are available on her blog, which is tasteofsouthsudan.com, and her videos may be found on YouTube. A dedicated mother of 3 who is married to the love of her life, Dr. Noella wants to inspire and mentor South Sudanese youth to achieve their potential. As you all cook along tonight, you can post your questions about cooking or South Sudan in the chat or the Q&A for Dr. Noella to answer. We will also take a break partway through to stop for questions about South Sudan and the cooking that we're doing. So thank you, and take it away, Dr. Noella.
Hello, I am Noella. Welcome to our home. Welcome to Taste of South Sudan Cooking Show. I am going to start by heating up some oil while we get started on cooking our lamb stew with vegetables. And so, Senator, would you focus on that pot? Yes, all right. So what I have here is a large pot, and I have some oil heating up, probably about 4 tablespoons or so. And it is mostly already heated. So at this point, I am going to add some onions and start frying the onions. So what we are cooking is a stew. The way it's cooked with so much love and flavor that when you visit someone and you smell this aroma, you already feel very welcomed to the house. So here we go. What I have there is about 2.5 onions, small red onions that I cut into cubes. And we are going to fry them until they're a little bit golden brown. And so that will take about 5 minutes or so. I think I was asked about the significance of this meal. So what I would say is that when I lived in South Sudan, we did not have access to eating meat on a daily basis. Since there's no refrigeration, and most of our pastoralists, the tribes with the most cattle, they use the cattle as a way to hold wealth. Similarly to if you had land and you're just holding the land. And when you had a big transaction, you would use the land to purchase something. So in this case, cows are used to barter. For example, you needed to marry a wife, and you had to give over 100 cattle to the other family. And so cattle, animals were usually killed maybe sporadically when there is an occasion, because people were not wealthy enough to eat meat on a daily basis. And we did not have commercial rearing of cattle. Therefore, it was always something like a naming ceremony, a wedding, a graduation. You had a big visitor arrive, or a funeral ceremony that you would get to slaughter your cattle. Or perhaps if you were just having a smaller celebration with your family members, it would be a goat or a sheep that would be slaughtered. This month, South Sudan, having a large population of Muslims, we're celebrating Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan. Towards the end of Ramadan, there is an Eid Ramadan, a holiday, a day of feasting. And on that day, the most meat that's eaten is lamb. And this is one way you would cook the lamb. So in South Sudan, we don't usually have the idea of steak, having a big slab of meat cooked by itself. Does not really exist. What we do is we cut it into smaller pieces and we cook it in a variety of ways, but one of the ways is such in a lamb stew. Another way would be to saute the cube pieces by itself, which we call shaya. And so that's the history behind this meal.
Noella, we have one question in.
Yes.
The question says, what are the comfort foods of South Sudan or of your home area?
Comfort foods. One I would say is porridge for morning. And then soup. Soup made out of, for example, chicken feet soup could be one. Another one is when you have on the day after you've slaughtered an animal, for instance, the head is cooked the following day in a soup, which is very hearty, and some people love it. Other comfort foods for me would have been the desserts. We have rice pudding with milk. And then we have something called sharia, which is really vermicelli. When you fry the vermicelli and you add some sugar to it, that is considered a comfort food. And Aseneda, what do you think is a comfort food? Fenugreek porridge is one. And then for me, one that I really love is kofta, which is minced meat mixed with spices and cooked on the stove and then put in a stew of tomato, onion base. So here we go, frying these onions. They're almost ready. Basically, I wait for some of them to turn golden, to start turning brown. I think, let me see. This is the lamb we'll be using. I had this already cut from the store I buy it from, which is a Mediterranean shop in San Antonio. I have just washed it lightly with water. And if possible, sometimes what you do is you try to check off some of the pieces of fat if you can remove it off. So this lamb obviously has bony parts in it, and we like that because it adds to the flavor. Now that I'm satisfied with how those onions are, I'm going to add my lamb, my onions that have fried. This is about 2 pounds of lamb, 2.5 pounds. And what I'm doing is, I don't want to put any water right now. I need the lamb to saute with the onions. In a way, what I'm doing is I'm trying to get it to brown because that will bring out the flavor and the sweetness of the lamb. And I don't cover it yet. But what I will do at this time is add salt. Now, if you read the instructions, we talked about one of our flavors, which is galangal root or cinnamon bark. So galangal root, this is also known as a Thai ginger. I don't know how it came to South Sudan, but I think a lot of our spices came down the Silk Road, down through Egypt, Saudi Arabia, through Sudan with the Arabian traders, and then introduced to Khartoum. And of course, we were one country with Sudan, so we got to introduce the same spices. The other way I would say was through Zanzibar. Zanzibar was one of the trade routes where the British would bring Indian workers to work on their plantations in Uganda and Nairobi. And through Zanzibar and East Africa, a lot of spices got introduced to the East African community. The Thai ginger is very fragrant, this galangal root. It really brings a different dimension to the food. So I am going to add 2 of them. At the time when I didn't have that, I would use the cinnamon stick. Now the Thai ginger, it has a little bit of spiciness, lemonness, a little bit of acidity. Cinnamon has a lot more sweetness than the Thai ginger. So we just add that early to the meal so that the flavors will infuse in as we continue to cook it. Okay, so right now, I want to get started with cooking the greens, which is our spinach and peanut butter. And I want to get started early because that lamb is going to take a little bit of a time to cook. It will take essentially about 30 minutes for the lamb to be tender before I want to add other ingredients. So in that time frame, we'll get on and start with the spinach greens, okay? All right, so we have our pot here. We're going to turn on the heat. Now, every once in a while, I will just mix that lamb to get it a little bit roasted. All right, so here we go. Oh. Excuse me, my earpiece fell out. I just have to get it back in. All right. This is our pot. So far it's empty. I am going to put some water. And a small quantity of onions. This is the rest of the onions that we had earlier. We'll just get the water to boil. We could use red or white onions. It won't be okay. Now, if you're cooking along, don't forget to mix your lamb every once in a while. while those two are boiling away, I would like to talk about the rest of the ingredients for our lamb. So this is what we have here. Flip the camera around a little bit this way. Okay. So for our lamb, we'll have tomatoes, tomato paste, some carrots, zucchini, green pepper. We have potatoes that we already peeled and cut in half. We want the potatoes cut in about this size. In fact, you can cut it one more this in half if you want it to that. We have our flavors, garlic, cumin. I think this is a serrano paper, I'm not sure, or a red chili pepper. We have the oil, which we've already used. This is coriander. This one is cumin. It's black pepper. And salt. All right. Come over this way, please. So here we go. We're just mixing the lamb, getting it roasted. This will add to the flavor of the meal. I just wanted to say, if you didn't manage to get any lamb, you could have used any meat of your choice, beef, goat meat, or anything else. All right. At this point, I'm going to add some water, then I'll cover and allow the lamb to cook. So I think I have about 2 cups of water. We will cover it, and my heat is on high.
Noella, there are a couple questions. Is now a good time for them?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, since South Sudan has many different languages along with different cultural practices, how does diet differ among the different groups? Are there any foods that are standard in all parts of the country?
Nowadays, people are moving around a lot, and they're beginning to have a confluence in terms of the type of foods they eat. But I would say that for the Equatorian regions, which are agriculturalists, most of the diet consisted of green vegetables and beans. They would eat a variety of beans, such as the red-eyed peas, the mung beans, black-eyed peas, red kidney beans, mung beans, pigeon peas, chickpeas, lentils, the green lentils, red lentils, and those ones were usually either boiled and then onion, tomatoes were fried and added to it, or they were boiled and then finished with peanut butter or sesame butter. For the green vegetables, it's really a huge variety that we would cultivate, more so than you would in a city in the United States, for instance. And let me see. For those people who are agriculturists, a lot of the green vegetables, they either cooked it in basically two methods. One is you added peanut butter to it. Another, you just cooked it with onion, tomatoes, and a salt called combo. And then the third way is that you cooked something like a beef stew, and then you added vegetables to it. So now, for our pastoralists, which are the Denka, Nuer, Shulu, those are the tribes that live along the Nile and more in proximity to the border with Sudan. Most of those tribes were nomadic. They travel around with their cattle looking for areas that had water. So their diet was more milk-based because they had a lot of cattle. They would add milk to most of their foods, sour milk or yogurt. They're not folks who eat with peanut butter. They don't use peanut butter in their food. They do eat green vegetables, but they cook it in a different manner. For those tribes also, their staple food is different. It is similar to couscous. And I really still find that fascinating, that you have couscous that originated in Turkey, Israel has it, Morocco has it. But deep down in South Sudan, we make our own using millet flour, for instance. So I find that so interesting. Okay, I will answer a little bit more of the question, but let me add my vegetables to this boiled onions in water. So one of the ingredients for us when we're cooking spinach is that we add combo, okay? All right. Let me see if I can find a little bit of combo today.
Noella, while you find that ingredient, McLeana had a little bit to add about.
Oh yes, go ahead.
Yes, so McLean is going to join us for a little bit more information on her foods. And you're muted. There we go.
Okay, thank you. It differs, like South Sudan it has 64 tribes. And for these 64 tribes, the kind of traditional foods that they prepare differs from region to region, like Dr. Noella explained. For example, like in this part of Equatorial region, they have black eye beans leaves. They call it ngete. That ngete is something that is affordable. Everybody can grow a garden. People grow throughout the year and people eat that. It's very easy. You cook it like cooking spinach with some, you can put onions, you can put with peanut butter, without onions. You can even eat it as salad. That's what people do. And for those tribes that keep cattle, they mainly eat, they depend on milk. And then side of the Nuer, the Dinkas, and then the Upper Nile side, they have traditional food that they call walawala, that they can make and they eat. So, but now, since the country got independence, people tend to eat from all this tribal tribal group kind of food that they eat. There is a lot of greens. They have something called tegri. Tegri, I don't know how you can call it in English, and I don't know whether we have it here in the US, but it's a kind of vegetables that people cook and eat. And I know some people in the US grow tegri. And then you have
I
hibiscus.
think it's amaranth. Amaranth.
Hibiscus, it's not only eaten or taken as a drink, you can have it as hot tea or cold. And then you use the leaves also to cook and eat. And then at some points also you use you can dry the leaves as well. And it's also treating diarrhea. It treats other kind of anemia as well. So whenever I have anemia, I take a lot of hibiscus juice to help me regain blood as soon as possible. So we have a lot, and then we have beans. People nowadays eat a lot of beans, and we also have what do you call it, Nawala? I forgot the name. Full masre.
Or fava beans.
You are muted. Oh, okay.
Oh, am I?
Yeah, so I can hear you now. It's okay.
You're okay. We can hear you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so there are like a lot of different foods that we have in South Sudan. And whenever you go from one region to region, you can just eat whatever you want, and they are all very healthy. We have a lot of cattle in South Sudan, but people don't really tend to use the cattle for food. They use the meat once in a while. They really love lamb meat. And that's what we eat all the time. So this is what I wanted to share.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to add one of our secret ingredients, which is what we call combo. But in this case, because of the audience and what's available, what I'm going to add is baking soda. Now, I just took something that's pinch, or should I say a quarter of a teaspoon of baking soda. The reason we use the baking soda or combo is that most of the vegetables that we cooked were harsh and they have a very tough cellulose fiber. And that's particularly for the leaves of the black-eyed peas. We call it corofolubia or nyete, as Maclean said. So now, when we came to America, the next best thing that we could find was spinach. So we alternated, and we're using spinach because that particular leaf is not available in America. So what I have here are the spinach greens that we have triple washed and chopped. And I did this ahead of time just to save time on the cooking. But I am going to add it to my water, onions, and baking soda. And what will happen, of course, with spinach, it's going to drop in volume. As it drops, then I'll add some more. And I will just mix it a little bit here as it drops down. Now, what I'm using is our South Sudanese cooking utensil called the lafreka. And I sell this on Taste of South Sudan. shop.tasteofsouthsudan.com. This is our primary, authentic, original cooking utensil from South Sudan. It's long and the end has a little bit of a T shape. So we're using this to cook our greens.
Question is there significance to South Sudan?
Significance to eating lamb. Well, for one, people love it. It's very tasty. And I think one of the big reasons is that Sudan calls itself a Muslim country. Most Muslims are forbidden to eat, they're forbidden to eat pig meat. So they don't eat pork. Instead of pork, what they would rear instead is lamb. So we have a lot of South Sudanese who are not even Muslim, but to this day, just from being accustomed to having lamb available, they refuse to eat pork because pork is considered an unclean animal, something like that. So for example, compared to East Africa, Uganda, and Kenya, who are neighbors with South Sudan, you'll find that those countries will have a lot of pork, but South Sudan does not have a lot of pork because of its history when it was one country with Sudan, that they had lamb. I think the other significance is just as a meat that's available. As Marlena mentioned, and I mentioned, the cattle owners do not use their cattle for beef. They're keeping it as a way of maintaining their wealth, but they're using it for transactions. Now, if you were to cut a cattle, the meat is just so much for one family. And because we don't have adequate preservation, electricity is not constant, it's not abundant. People do not have large refrigerators. So if they cut a cattle, it was for a big event. Yes, it was for a big event, and it was where you got to share that meal with a large number of families in one day. Well, for today's our greens, it's really shrunk down, as you can see. Now, you know, spinach has its own water. That's why we didn't put a lot of water in there. So I am going to let it cook a little bit more, at which point I'll add peanut butter. Okay, let's take a look at our lamb. So one thing you'd notice, it's actually shrinking in size. So it's getting cooked, but it's not ready yet for the next step. So I am going to cover it and let it boil some more. And my heat is on high. All right, got it covered.
Another question is, at what age did you learn to cook, and were the tools or methods you used in South Sudan different than how you cook?
Oh yeah, so I started learning to cook when I was 9 years old. It would start with where your mom will ask you to beat the garlic. We use a pestle and mortar to beat out garlic. Oh, Senator, will you bring it? It's back there, the pestle and mortar. And then you graduate to making, I think, breakfast eggs, or mixing the food, or making simple foods. So we use something like this in South Sudan for our garlic. This is something that I still use to this day. I think a lot of my cooking methods are still the same as before. We're using a knife. We're using our lafrega to make our acida. Here's a big difference. It depends on where you are in South Sudan, but our stove, one would use a charcoal stove or a gas stove, but every family always had charcoal as the backup. And most of the time we cook the charcoal outside. So in our household, I think when we moved to Khartoum because of the war, when I was about 9, we moved to the capital city, and we're now living in an apartment. Then we had electricity, and then we also had gas. So we will cook using an electric stove, but at the same time, we always had a charcoal stove. Now that I would call privilege, because for the majority of people in South Sudan, they're cooking outside using a charcoal stove or a clay stove. If you have not done that before, to cook all your meals using a charcoal stove, it's really tedious, because number one, it's low on the ground. You have to sit on a low stool. Number two, charcoal is dirty, it makes your fingertips It's kind of really leaves this cold black stain on your fingertips. You cannot regulate the temperature of travel. So you could possibly get your pot very, very hot. And then you also have a lot of accidents, which is the embers would just get too hot and start flying. You would have little burns on your legs or on your hands. And then there's issues of your stove is not stable. So your pot could fall over or tip over. It's just a lot of variables to consider, and it takes a lot of practice to get it right. And let me say, when we were in South Sudan, right, we would make our own mincemeat using a handheld mincer. And then we used to grind our own peanut butter. We also, I think we were privileged that we had a handheld mincer to grind the peanut butter, but that doesn't make it smooth. Then you have to use a stone grinder. The ladies would have to get down on their knees, and you have a little stone, and then a bigger stone, and grind your peanuts until they're smooth, sometimes doing it twice or 3 times. So all those things are time consuming, obviously. And then the other one was also the grains. Having lived in the capital of South Sudan, Juba, we have a lot of grinding mills to grind your grains. But if you are in a camp, you are outside, those people would actually grind their grains the old way. Basically, you have to pound it in a huge pestle with a huge stick. And after pounding it, you have to grind it with a stone grinder with hands. So on a daily basis, women spend a lot of their time just making the base meals. All right, so let us take a look at this. Okay, our spinach are cooked. I'm going to add some water, and then I'm going to add the peanut butter to it.
Prior to the question about eating land, do South Sudanese eat goat too?
They eat goat, yes, they do eat goat.
Also, what are the accepted gender roles around food and homemaking in South Sudan? Are any of these roles or practices changing as people develop their connections to travel and internet?
So number one, yes, we do eat goat, and I have a story about that. When we were in Juba, our family had sheep and goats. And then we used to say that goats are stupid. They will go walking and they don't come home alone. And they get lost. Then my father will have to send my brothers to go look for the goats. You go walking all over looking for your goats to bring them back home. Okay, so we just added our peanut butter. So what I had there was 4 teaspoons of peanut butter. I will see whether it's enough. Basically, what I'm looking for is a smooth, creamy meal. And this is the peanut butter that I used. This is natural peanut butter with no additives. Got this from one of our main grocery chains. They have a section where they make their own peanut butter. All right, so if you were wondering, as I said, I had 4 tablespoons of peanut butter, and these were about 3 bunches of spinach that we cut. Now it's a little bit too thick, so the consistency should be a little bit more lighter. I am therefore going to add more water, and now lower the heat as well. No, I got it. I'm just waiting for a minute to answer. to a nice topping point. Ah, there, nice. Take this away. Okay, now we've added the peanut butter. We have to allow the peanut butter to cook. When the peanut butter starts cooking, you'll see the oil separating and the color will turn from what it is now, which is more white, to a more brown color. Okay, now to go back to that question about gender roles. Yes, very much so, there are gender roles. I would love to say that they're changing, but I don't think that they're changing as quickly as some of us would wish. And it also depends on different families, because in my family, when I was growing up, my mother decided that girls and boys should both do the same duties. So she had us all taking turns in the kitchen. We had a timetable. Somebody's turn to wash dishes, to cook the food, to mop the floor. And as we got older, then you'll find more and more the boys tend to move veer away from the kitchen. But at least in my household, we have all our brothers learned how to cook most of our meals. What I ended up finding out is that in most South Sudanese households, that was not the case. A lot of boys were not allowed into the kitchen. They did not learn the basics, how to make a meal, how to cook for themselves. Those were all considered girls' duties. I guess say what you may of it. For me, I wish there would be more equal division of labor, because this extra burden on the girls is one of the primary reasons why girls end up dropping from their education early. Essentially, once the girl is capable of contributing to labor, once they reach their teenage years, they begin to be inundated with tasks. The more remote the family live, the more manual tasks of daily living there were, such as carrying water by hand, tending to fire and firewood by your hand, cooking, cleaning the compound. I find more and more that the more a house has modern amenities, the more the men are more likely to get in there and cook. So, I mean, nobody wants to get their hands dirty with charcoal if they can avoid it. However, the girls have no choice, they have to do it. Boys could lean on something to say, oh, this is not my job, this is a girl's job, and get away from doing it. All right. So here we are. This is nice. Got to lower my heat. All right. Also time for us to check on our lamb. So now, we get to add our tomatoes to the lamb. I will be adding a small amount of tomatoes onto my peanut butter. And this is to add color. Now it's time for me to taste it because it's almost ready. Okay, I hardly have any salt in there, so I need to add some salt. Low heat. Here we go. That's what our meal looks like. So going back to the question of how have our cooking methods changed? I would say one of the biggest time savers is having a dishwasher. If you don't have a dishwasher, you're manually washing by hand. And 98% of households in South Sudan are washing dishes by hand. The other one is running water inside a house. So if your house had running water, that was a privilege, because it saves you a lot of time in terms of cleanliness, washing. I know how to do it the other way, but I just want you to imagine on a daily basis when you had to fetch the water for your cooking, but you also have to fetch the water for washing the dishes. So you have 3 basins. You have 1 basin here for the dirty dishes, for the soap. You have 1 here for the rinse, and then after you're done, you put them on a tray, or even most of this is done outside. So in most of South Sudan, the kitchen is an open air kitchen. You're cooking out in the open. So I'll leave that for you to imagine sometimes how harsh that could be, because you probably had a small covering over your head, such as bamboo or a little hut, but the temperature was not controlled. So since most of our country is hot, it would get very, very hot in your kitchen. Here, we are going to add a little more salt. So if you're cooking this meal, if your peanut butter has added salt to it, just adjust your salt after you add the peanut butter. You don't want your spinach and peanut butter greens to have too much salt. All right. Now, this is something that I still do. In South Sudan, when we're cooking our beef, or when you're making a stew, the base of the stew is your onions and tomatoes. So what we'll do is you have to basically blend it, and you blend it manually. This is how you do it. You just go to somebody's kitchen and you hear that sound. Tuck, 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 tuck. They are smashing those tomatoes flat. So I still do that here, but I do have the option of using a blender. All right, so this is all done. Yay. Salt is great. Okay. We are going to set it aside. Yes.
When did you leave South Sudan?
Will you move my camera a little bit this way? So I left South Sudan in 1996. My earpiece fell off again. Have you seen where it went? Okay, I left South Sudan in 1996, and that was when I boarded the plane to come to New York City to pursue my medical career. Ah, there it is. Excuse me, the earpiece keeps falling off. So in this part, we're going to cook rice. We are going to start by heating up oil. And I have about 2 tablespoons of oil. Going to turn on the heat. This is the rice I have. These are 2 cups, and I have kept the cup we used here. Just whatever cup measurement you use, that's what you should use for your water. You're going to rinse this rice with water, just about twice or so. And I have the sieve to drain the water out. You may not be able to see this space very well because obviously doing it at the same moment. So that is the rice, and I will drain it over my sieve. Let's do it again, twice. All right, let's look over here. Samantha. Our lamb stew is ready for tomato paste. This tomato paste is definitely an optional step. You do not have to use it. I think what happens is that if one didn't have enough ingredients, tomato paste is used as a thickener for the stew. One of the things we want is a red stew. And although I do know that tomato paste has added color to it, but we South Sudanese love that addition. I think I have about 3 tablespoons of tomato paste here. So I have added the tomato paste. I'm going to let it blend in, and once it's cooked, it's time for us to add our vegetables. It's time for us to pay attention to this rice. So to get our South Sudanese rice, we want to fry our rice a little bit in the oil, and that will keep it separated so it doesn't clump together. Now I think my oil has overheated, so I'll take it off and allow it to cool for a little bit. Well, here's some kitchen safety tip. So what I do is I drain the water initially when I add the rice. And I am going to pour it and keep my body away. And I'm going to roast them before adding any more water for about 3 minutes or so. Okay. Yay. Okay. If you see this, this is the base for most South Sudanese meals. If you're making any meal that has red sauce in it, this is the base. The onions, tomatoes, tomato paste, and if you're going to be using any meat, the meat itself. From this base, so many varieties of meals can be made. Just assessing my salt level. So at this point, I'm going to add my vegetables. I will add potatoes first. Does it take longer to cook? All right, back to our rice. We toast it. I'm going to tend to my rice. Okay, I'm about ready to add my water.
Potatoes or boiled or just peeled?
No, they were just peeled. We put them in water to get them soft so that they'll cook faster. They were peeled and soaking in water. Now I'm just waiting for my water to boil so I can add it to the rice.
Please talk about why it's harder for girls to graduate from high school than it is for boys in South Sudan. Are there other factors that the roles and expectations?
Yes, very much so. All right, now we're going to add our water. So we have 2 cups of rice, so I will be adding 4 cups of water. And I'm using the same cup I used for my rice. I have an abundance of heat. This is what happens when you go live. What would not happen normally. Okay, we add some salt and spices for our rice, which includes some cloves, about 4, and then cardamom. And of course, what I do is test the water to know how much salt you have in your rice. Right now, it's perfect. Yeah. Okay. So I will have my heat on medium, and I need to find the cover. You know where my cover is? Oh, here's the cover. All right, we are going to add the rest of our vegetables to our lamb stew.
Does the spinach peanut butter act as a sauce to go over the rice?
Never. Peanut butter with rice, never.
We add some water to our stew, cover it, let it boil. And that gives me a chance to answer your questions. So the question about factors that prevent girls from graduating at the same rate as boys, they're multifactorial. Number one is the parents' attitudes towards girls. In our culture, when a girl is married, she's considered as belonging to the boy's family. Because of that, most families, they don't value their daughters as much. Because if you had something which at the end of the day didn't belong to you anymore, if you spend more money educating or investing in that item, only to have it not be part of you anymore, they would feel as if they have wasted their money. Families who are poor would rather spend their money educating their boys. Our education is not free. We don't have any free public education. As you get to the higher grades, then you start incurring costs for school. Books, clothes, transportation. And then there's also the item of loss of labor that child would bring to the family. Because if you lived in a village, there were a lot of manual tasks to be taken care of. Things to do with tending to cattle, tending to the fields. Because if you were an agricultural family, you had to cultivate, and from what you cultivated, you ate from that. So if you send all your children to school and there's no one to do the field work, then the family would feel amiss. There would be, yeah, that's primarily. Then of course there's the issue of early child marriage. A lot of our societies, they still believe that education, the longer a woman stays in the educational system, her ability to get married decreases. And it's definitely an oxymoron, right? Because if she were educated, she should be able to earn money for the family, but they don't see that. They see that if a woman is highly educated, which means she spent many, many years in schooling, A, they fear she may not get married anymore because nobody wants her. Or two, she gets to be too old and she loses that desirable, marriageable age. And then the other one is bride price. Some families see their daughters as a source of wealth. So you have 3 daughters. By the time they go to be a marriageable age, you will have old men coming to you, bringing you something like 300 heads of cattle. And there are many who will go for that. It feels like a payday. Just feels like a payday. So that is really one of the issues. The girls get married off. Fathers don't feel that educating girls is a priority. The society looks down on educated women because educated women use their voice. They disobey cultural norms. And some people do not want to see that type of progress. They consider going against their culture, or that they have lost their daughters to education. And then there's poverty. You don't have enough money, you only send your boys to school. And then there's lack of support. So if girls are inundated with menial labor at home, cooking, cleaning, unfairly compared to boys, they do not have the time to participate in school activities. They don't have the time to do those exams at a high caliber. They don't have the time to pass. They don't have the time to remember the knowledge. They end up failing their classes and then they drop out. Okay, so just to show you our rice is cooking, and so we have 20 minutes for the end of the show. All right. read me more questions if you have.
Was a regular green pepper added to the stew, or was it a jalapeno or cilantro?
That was a regular green pepper. So most of South Sudanese cuisine is not high on the pepper scale. We use more the sweet bell peppers. We do have the red chili pepper, but it's usually created as a paste on the side. What I would tend to do sometimes is I would just drop a chili pepper or serrano pepper in the meat and have it cooked. Because if I cut it open, it would increase the spiciness. So compared to West African food, or even Ethiopian meals, we don't add a lot of pepper. Instead, we add our spices, such as coriander powder, cumin powder, then we add black pepper, and then one of our main spices that we use, not a spice, but I mean herb, is the dill weed. So this is dill that I have chopped up. And then of course we have garlic, minced garlic. Still pounded the traditional way in the castellano. So those are all the spices for our meal. And we're just going to be waiting for the vegetables to cook. And I need a little bit more salt. Now, Leanne, this is a right time for my cleaner to jump in if she has some comments she wants to state.
I have a question, Dr. Noella.
Yes.
When I was in South Sudan, I was served goat and it was delicious.
Uh-huh.
Is that something that happens from time to time? People eat goat?
Yes, people do eat goat from time to time. And now there's a lot of influx of East Africans into South Sudan. Those are Kenyans, Ugandans, migrant workers. And a lot of those workers, they primarily eat goat in Kenya compared to lamb. And they cook it in a little bit of a different way. I think they grill it over an open fire. So yes, you will see more and more goat in South Sudan. We have something, and I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently some people in South Sudan claim to be allergic to goat. I don't know what the allergy is, but they claim that, I don't know, it causes itching, or that they also don't like the smell, because the goat meat, the male goat smells different from the female goat.
What jobs are open to girls when they graduate from high school in South Sudan? What leadership roles are available for women in business and government in their communities? Is this changing?
Well, it is definitely changing now. I think there are more roles open. However, you're still limited by gender. So for instance, nowadays, I see more women entering into politics, but however, in the politics department, they're either holding a puppet role or they're holding a position of a secretary, one the secretary. So there are a lot of women in the ministries where they're doing a lot of the background work. writing proposals, doing a lot of the writing and researching. However, the top positions always goes to men. And if you find a woman that has been given one of those top positions, most of the time they're just holding it, or they have been handed that role. However, the real people in power are the people who appointed them into that role. Now, more and more now, South Sudan has changed so much in the last 5 years. There are more women going into businesses, in the market, selling in the market. There are more women. I think if I could think about it, when it comes to construction, most of it is men. When it comes to engineers, we have some few women who are engineers, but not a large number. When it comes to police work, a lot more men than women. Women are entering to the police field. When it comes to the military, it's probably 90% men at this point. There's still very strict gender roles that are maintained, but the landscape is changing, and I'm glad to see that happen. Okay, here we are. Let's look at our rice. So as it cooks, we just want to turn it from down to up, and we have lowered our. We're going to wait for the water to drain. You don't want to do too much mixing, or else the rice will break apart and start looking like a soup. But what I want you to notice is how the oil allows it to stay separated. So it's not gonna be a sticky rice. And then let's take a look at our main meal of the day. It's the lamb dish.
How much dill should be added to the stew?
As much as we want. Within reason, quarter of a cup. You can add up to a quarter of a cup, or even half a cup.
Also, where can we get galangal?
Galangal root. I have searched for it online, and I'm glad to say it's available. And Taste of South Sudan also has a stash that we're selling. I think if you, so it's spelled G-H-A-N-E-H-A-L, galangal root.
Is it similar to cinnamon?
To what?
To cinnamon.
Not exactly. It's similar to ginger. It's more similar to ginger. So it's called Thai ginger.
Do you go back to South Sudan?
I go back almost every 2 years for the past 10 years. So I was there last year, and I'll plan a trip a year from now. Pass me my boreba, please. I'll take it out. So these are the Goraiva cookies. I don't know if you had a chance to make some yourself, but this is what they came out. I made mine a little bit bigger, but there's a clove in each. I think what you'll know is missing is we didn't use any baking soda or baking powder, and they smell so good. So the person in our house who loved them the most is our dog. Feeling dark in here. Okay, we're checking on our rice again. Of course, we just don't want, you don't want the rice to burn. But at this point now, I don't know. option to just turn off your fire and let the steam carry the rest of it, or lower the heat to 2. Okay. I am interested in making sure my last meat. So I'll just tell you that one of your style points when you're cooking the lamb stew is that you don't want your potatoes to break apart. If your potatoes break apart in your meal, you lose style points. You don't want to cook it too much so it doesn't become like a puree. So when you're cooking natural meat, it's always important to make sure it's fully cooked. Because sometimes the toughness can vary. So what I would do is just pull a piece out of the meal, cut it, make sure it's easy to cut. Ah, that's nice. Just cut through so easy. And then you taste it and make sure it's chewable. Oh, turn this way. I was demonstrating how to test whether you're I can't see it. Yeah, demonstrating how to make sure your meat is fully cooked. Cut it and then you taste it. You can chew it easily. Great. Good job. Our rice is done. We are going to serve it.
Would you prefer substituting the longbow root with ginger or cinnamon stick?
With a cinnamon stick, definitely.
Also, does anything go on top of the rice or is it eaten by itself?
Oh yes, we never really eat rice by itself. Unless if you're like my daughters and my son, they don't want their rice to touch their vegetables, to touch their stew. But in South Sudanese style, if you put your rice here, you put the stew on top of it, and you essentially eat them together. Because you consider the rice to be like a blank canvas. So when you're serving it, of course, just take up any cloves that you see. You don't want somebody biting into it and getting all that flavor in their mouth. One of the neat things to know is that the cloves and the cardamom are the same spices that we use for making tea. So my son, he's 8 now, but he used to say, "Mom, the rice smells like tea." And that is why. All right. So our lamb stew is essentially done. We have put all our spices, our vegetables are cooked. Turn the heat off, and we're going to serve it. Of course, don't serve your galangali. We'll remove it off. Okay. All right, we're going to turn our camera to face our where we present the food. So this will be an opportunity to offer some remarks. Lena or Leanne, if you wish to do so.
Dr. Noella, I'm wondering, to what do you attribute your ambition educationally and career-wise?
Uh-huh. A combination of my father and my mother. My father was the only son out of 3, the son of a policeman. And he told us how he had an opportunity to be one of the only educated members of his tribe at that early time, in about 1964. There was a school built in his village by the colonialists. And then he was one of the children selected to go to the school. And after that, he had an opportunity to go to Makerere University. And at which point he won a scholarship to come to America to do his master's in fine arts. So he used to travel a lot. He would get to go to conferences. And we'll ask him to take us with him, but he'll tell us that education is your ticket out of poverty. So he preached to us constantly about deferred gratification. Study hard so you don't have to be poor. Study hard so you will get out of here yourself. He basically told us, you will be the one to take yourself out of this place if you want. And yeah, we didn't get a chance to travel with him because, as I now know, he was invited to conferences and it wasn't a vacation where he could bring his family members since it was being sponsored by the organizers of the conferences. And then of course there was my mother, who was also one of the highly educated women of her time, because she, her father was a medical officer, which would be in this day the equivalent of a doctor at that time. Because of that, she traveled with her father a lot throughout their village in Ye, and then she was put in a boarding school early when very few girls were being educated in South Sudan. From that boarding school at a certain time, I think her family went to Uganda as refugees, and she was also in boarding school in Uganda. She learned a wide, great educational base, and then she went to a teachers training college in Khartoum to study nursing, and then she went to Nairobi to get a nuclear training.
Oh, wow.
So throughout our childhood, she told our father basically, like, if you want to prevent girls from falling pregnant, from getting early marriage, you have to educate girls. So she made sure that they focus their money on getting us into schools. And compared to most families, they actually carved time for me to study. So I didn't have to do housework unless when I was on vacation. When I came from school, I was actually told, go study, go to your room, leave the door open, here, I need to see you. How could I fail in that environment?
Mm-hmm.
My mother pushed me, my father pushed me. They came to my teachers' conferences, and yeah, I was held to a high standard throughout primary school and high school. And to my benefit, I think they recognized an innate intelligence, because in my elementary school, I would get all A's. I would be either number 1, number 2, or number 3 throughout my elementary school when we were in Cuba until about grade 6, when we moved to Khartoum, running from the world cross. And there in Khartoum, they enrolled me in one of the best English schools, which was a foreign school run by foreigners called Unity High School. So in that school, I was basically among the best educated students in Sudan that time. And that is my story. I am not a product of my own doing. I'm very much a product of my parents' efforts. And to that end, I'm grateful.
Well, that's an amazing story. And
Thank you.
we're so glad that you're here to teach us about cooking and about the culture in South Sudan, because most Americans don't know a lot about that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. This is how we would serve our typical meal. We serve it on the same plate. And Asaneta will be working the spoon. And I have here hibiscus juice. I think we were concerned about not having the time to demonstrate it. So we did not get to demonstrate it. But I will show you the hibiscus leaves. These are the hibiscus leaves that you soak in water. And what you have at the bottom, the juice that seeps out, put it in water, and mix it with sugar. You get the hibiscus skin. Make sure it's showing. That's a picture of the hibiscus. All right, so I think you all got a chance to see the live show. It's always interesting, you never know what will happen. It's always an adventure, and I'm glad you all joined me.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to have this demo up on our website very shortly. So if you want to share it with friends who weren't able to come today, that's available to you on the Project Education South Sudan.org website.
Thank you.
If you would care to donate to Project Education South Sudan, the link, Dinah's putting it in the chat, but it is tinyurl.com/PESS donate. Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it, everyone. You're great. Thank you.